Hello and welcome to Dialed In, a podcast about customer service, automation, AI, contact centers, and everything in between. I'm your host, Gadi Shamia, CEO and co-founder here at Replicant, the company that automates customer service calls and chat at scale. We've been doing it way before it was cool. So now it seems like everybody on the planet is automating customer service calls. And I have a really special guest today. It was actually recommended by another guest of our podcast. Would like to welcome Jay Baer.
Hi, how you doing? Great to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Maybe just introduce yourself to the people that don't know you.
You bet. I'm Jay Baer. I've been in customer experience, business growth, and marketing for 30 plus years. I've written 7 best-selling business books on marketing and CX. I've founded 6 multi-million-dollar companies. I've worked with probably 700 brands as a consultant and advisor, including 40 or 42, I think now, of the Fortune 500. In my spare time, I am the #2 tequila influencer in the world. So I get to spend time drinking tequila for money, which isn't the worst job ever.
I'm going to ask you about that. Like, how do you get to become a tequila influencer?
Yeah, please
Especially
do.
now, because tequila is all the jazz. It used to be like, who knows what tequila is, and now everybody talks about tequila all the
Yeah, for
time.
sure. Yeah.
But how do you get to be a tequila influencer?
I'm from Arizona originally and near the Mexican border. And so I've always been interested in agave spirits and been kind of surrounded by that Latino culture. And about 25 years ago, I started to go to this bar every Wednesday with a buddy of mine. And this bartender was very, very early into this whole trend. And so I would just sort of go to school every Wednesday. And over the next couple of decades, just learned more and more about tequila and agave spirits. I started going to Mexico and visiting distilleries and meeting producers. And so just literally, just for my own enjoyment, learned more and more and more over a long period of time. And then 2 years ago, Monday, actually, so it's 2 years ago this coming Monday, I decided to make a video about tequila. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just make some videos to help people learn more about tequila, learn some of the things that I've learned. And it kind of went crazy. And now I find myself as the #2 tequila influencer. And we have lots of brand partnerships and affiliate programs and e-commerce and shirts and hats and, and the whole thing. It's like a real business now.
Amazing. So we know how you became a tequila influencer, and you talk about your background.
Yeah.
What was your journey to customer service? You've been in it well before everybody cares about
Yeah.
this cost center out there
Yeah.
in the corner.
I'm a 7th generation entrepreneur. So my family has been self-employed since the 1840s. I was always just, even at a very young age, it was just sort of trained into me, right? That the primacy of the customer and that the only way you can survive and grow as a business is to put the customer first. And my family businesses were always set up with that bias even before that became sort of common practice. And then I've as I mentioned in the introduction, started a number of my own businesses as well. And it was probably, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, I really started to understand that customer experience and customer service are the best marketing, right? That if you deliver exemplary service that is actually so powerful that it creates word of mouth amongst your customers, that actually allows you to reduce your marketing spend. And when you can get around that premise operationally, you understand that taking care of customers not only reduces churn, but also creates net new revenue. So once I kind of figured that out as just a sort of a formula, then I spent a lot of time working with brands on this and writing books about it and giving speeches about it, etc.
Yeah, it's so true, and I'm still shocked how people underestimate that. I like when I have a good experience, I like to talk about it in public, because why not? That's why people should do it. And I bought a carry-on from Away Travel, and my
Yeah.
wife's like, this is ridiculously expensive. Why do you spend so much time on a carry-on? And then something small broke inside. I emailed them and they said, oh, sorry, we don't have the part, but we're gonna send you a new carry-on. Didn't ask for a receipt, didn't ask for anything. Literally just didn't ask for my credit card to guarantee I'm gonna send the old suitcase. Just send a new one. It was the wrong color. I messaged him again. Now they're sending another one. Still, I now have
You
3
have a collection.
carry-on from them, and I have to return them, of course, but no credit card. They made it super simple. And my wife, the first thing she said was, I'm gonna get one too. Because now she realizes that if something goes wrong, you paid for this product, but you're gonna get a much better service. And And now I talk about it in public, and thousands of people are going to hear about that, and that's so powerful.
That's it. I wrote a book called Hug Your Haters, which is about how to handle unhappy customers, a very popular business book a few years ago. And one of the big takeaways in that work is that customer service now is a spectator sport. Before the internet, and again, that's going back a ways now, but in those days, if you had a great experience with Away, like how many people could you tell, right? It would be limited to the number of people that you actually come into contact with in the real world, right? So you might tell your actual friends, you might tell the parents of your kids' friends, you might tell people at church or whatever, but 100 people, maybe 50, I don't know. It's not that many people. And so the multiplied value of the opportunity of treating customers that well was truly reduced a little bit. But now, where every review, every social media post, every podcast conversation reaches hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, each of those now little sort of awareness points builds value for Away and makes them a provider of choice. And it's no surprise that they've grown so fast because they're doing it right. I actually have two Away. I have two of the same carry-on, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, now entire family now have them. It became the standard carry-on of the family. You talked about what customer service is supposed to be. You advised 700 brands. What are people doing differently today? Is this amplification of good and bad in customer service really change behavior from the brand's perspective, or by and large, the few that get it, but the majority still don't?
It's a really good question. And I don't know that we can actually answer it other than anecdotally. Let me tell you a couple of things. One, at least in the US, the American Customer Service Index, the ACSI, which measures the totality of the economy and customers' satisfaction with service, the ACSI at the end of 2022 was the lowest it's been in like 20 years, right? So despite all the conversations we've had about customer service and CX and podcasts like this and books like the ones I write, it was the worst ever, right? Which is like, what are we doing? We're not making any progress here. However, just recently, they did the survey again, and the ACSI is now as high as it's been in a really long time, like 20 years. So it went from super low to pretty high in less than a year, like 3/4, I think. And so the question is, how and why is that true? And I have two theories. Theory one is that customers have been trained to expect so little from businesses that their expectations have actually dropped. And now if you just kind of get the basics right, it seems so amazing that it then actually elevates the index. That's maybe it. But I actually think, and I hope this is the answer, that businesses are really starting to understand exactly what you and I are talking about here, that customer service is an investment in revenue growth, not a cost. And that time and dollars spent on automating customer service, on adding relevance and personalization to customer service, in adding empathy to customer service, that all of those expenditures will pay off with true ROI if you just stay with it. And I do think there is an awakening, a true awakening about that in business. Now, is it a majority of companies? I don't know about that, but I think there's more than there used to be.
So you talk a lot, switching to your favorite topic. You talk a lot about speed in customer service. Let's maybe take a step back and walk me through how you came to think that speed is the most important attribute of customer service, or one of the most important attributes.
Yeah, I've done a lot of research on this. My most recent book is called The Time to Win: How to Exceed Customers' Need for Speed. And the way I came up with this is coming out of the pandemic, I sort of had a relatively simple conclusion, which was that we care about time more than we did before. We care about how much time we have. We care about how we spend our time. And a lot of these trends that were coming out of the pandemic, people wanting to work from home, don't want to spend time commuting, quiet quitting, great resignation, bleisure travel. That's a new one now. You hear this one where you take your kids to the conference and you like double dip the trip. That's like a whole trend. Like all of these trends, as it turns out, are actually the same trend, right? It's the same trend, which is that we care about time more than ever. And at the same time, I realized that, throughout my long career, I've never heard a customer say, next time, business, why don't you do that more slowly? Like customer expectations around responsiveness, like always go up. They never stay still and they certainly never go backwards. And so those two things together, I was like, I'm pretty sure that customers have already elevated speed on their list of priorities when dealing with businesses. But as I always do when I write a new book, I actually had to validate it with research. So I spent a bunch of time and a bunch of money to do a true landmark study on the relationship between responsiveness and revenue. And it turns out that it is true, that people do care about time more than ever. And in fact, 2/3 of customers say that speed is as important as price. That has huge implications for every business. And so my conclusion is that, yes, customers have elevated responsiveness on their list of priorities, and largely businesses haven't necessarily elevated on their list of priorities. And that's a disconnect that we got to solve for.
So in customer service, what is speed? What would you define as speed? What kills speeds? What enhances speed? Let's maybe define.
Yeah.
If I'm now hearing you and say, okay, I want to be faster,
Yeah.
what is it? Is it kill the wait time on the phone? How do I do that? Like, what is the what's my roadmap to speed?
It's actually every point of the customer journey. So not even in just solely a service capacity, but even in a customer experience capacity. I mean, the best way to be fast is to make sure nobody ever has to call you. And so you think about things like over-informing customers or providing more self-service options, using AI and predictive analytics to reach out to customers before they have a problem because you're pretty sure they're going to have a problem. All of those kind of tactics and techniques very much increase how fast you appear to be to customers. But in a pure service environment where you're reacting to customer needs, there's really sort of two dimensions to this. One is speed of response, and the other is speed of resolution, right? So how long does it take you to answer the phone? How long does it take you to get to the live chat? How long does it take you to respond to the email, respond to the voicemail, etc.? Doing that quicker will absolutely produce positive outcomes for the business, because one of the things we tested in the research is that when businesses are faster than customers expect, they respond faster. It actually creates meaningful psychological changes in the head of the customer, right? They feel respected, they feel empowered, they feel loved. And we've actually proven that if you respond faster, customers will actually spend more money and they will stay more loyal, right? There is truly a relationship between responsiveness and revenue. So answering faster is certainly part of it, but you also have to solve faster, right? Because if you're not actually giving customers, if back to your example, you contact Away and say, hey, I've got a part broken in my carry-on. Now they could have responded to you in 30 seconds, and that would have been amazing. But if it took them 30 days to send you a replacement, like what have you actually gained, right? So you got to kind of play both sides of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I want your take about how AI impacts that, and I think I have the answer. This is something we've been doing without coding at speed for a long time, and maybe I use an example. We work with the majority of the AAAs in North America. There are, everybody think it's one, but it's a federation, and there's a bunch of them in every area. And we work with two main use cases with them. One of them is the emergency roadside service, which in this case, speed for resolution really plays a great role. You call and you never have to wait on hold for an agent, even if it's snowstorm outside, you're always going to be answered right away. We actually finish these calls in about half the time it takes to an agent, because that's something really easier for a machine, like figure out where you are in the world, send you a text message, can kind of get a little UI that they can pinpoint your location just like you do in Uber, and so on. So on the no wait, and then you get your call resolved in half the time, and the clock start ticking much earlier for when the tow truck is going to arrive. You don't have to wait. You don't have to speak with the agent for so long. And then you talk about preventing the need to call. Of course, tow trucks are not as predictable as one would want to. We can tell you, hey, your tow truck is going to arrive in an hour, but this traffic, it will be an hour and a half. We'll automate a call to this customer, say, hey, don't worry, don't call us again to ask where's your tow truck. It is delayed. And by the way, are you still there? Because sometimes it's Good Samaritan that helped you, or you still feel safe. Because if you're not, we want to escalate the call. That's a great example.
I love it.
I'm telling you the story, and you say, wow, it's amazing. But then some people will hear it and say, but don't customers still want to speak with agents? Would they rather wait and get the human touch? And we hear it a lot. And of course, we have a strong opinion that people rather speed on compared to human touch. But I wonder, what's your research say about that?
Yeah, the research suggests that you're exactly right, that if given the choice, people will choose speed over humanity. Now, there are some demographic differences in that. There are some generational cohort differences in that. But that genie's not going back in the bottle, right? No rational business analyst would say, oh no, we're going to enter an era where people don't want to use automated AI. Instead, they want to insist that they actually go into the bank and talk to a teller. Like, is there a group of people who still feels more comfortable talking to a human? Yes. I'll say, however, we're going to be in an era like by the end of this year where they're not going to know whether it's an actual person or not. I've tested a lot of the AI verbal response engines. I'm sure you have as well. And they're good enough that if you didn't know it was AI, you wouldn't know it was AI. So this idea that it has to be a human, I think is going to feel hilariously anachronistic in 2 years, and maybe sooner than that. I love what you're doing with the, hey, it's going to take us longer because of traffic, so we're going to proactively reach out and send you a text that says, hey, I know we told you 60, but it's going to be 90, because that solves one of the key things that we talk about in the book and that we discovered in the research is that, yes, definitely people care about raw time and speed, right? Faster is better, period. But what they care about almost as much is certainty. See, we live in an era now where understanding what's happening and what's going to happen next has become the default setting. And it didn't used to be that way. So just by way of anecdote, I think you and I are both old enough to remember a time before you could get a car on an app, right? You would have to telephone a taxi. And in some cities, you've got enough density, you can just raise your hand, right? And a taxi will stop. But in a lot of parts of the world, they just don't do that. You actually have to get on the phone and call a taxi. So in the day, I would use a pay phone, okay? And you would put a quarter in the phone and you'd dial like 555-5555, and this is Lou. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, I need to get to the airport. He'll be by to get you. And that's it. And so then you're like, well, like when is the taxi coming? Don't know. How much is it going to cost? Don't know. Which of the identical taxis on the road is mine? Don't know. Like, no information. The only information you could have is that a man named Lou said somebody will be by to get you. That was sum total, right? And now, if you use an app to order a car, you've got license plate number, you've got picture of the car, you've got headshot of the driver, you got like blood test results, right? You know exactly when they're going to show up. You know to the penny what it's going to cost. You can watch the icon as it moves towards you. And this is just symbolic of kind of where we are as a society, where uncertainty creates a lot of anxiety now, because we've all been trained that uncertainty is the exception. So one of the things that I talk to brands about a lot is closing the uncertainty gap. And the uncertainty gap is the difference between what the business knows about what's going on and what the customer knows. So in your example, the uncertainty gap is that AAA and the tow truck driver realize they know it's going to be longer than they thought. The customer doesn't know that. So solving that, crossing that uncertainty gap, and then bringing the customer back up to equal footing from an information perspective is a huge best practice, because information asymmetry causes panic now in customers. So yes, we want to be faster, but one of the best ways to be perceived as faster is to make sure that people know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, so I'm curious about your opinion about communicating and over communicating. Is it in which point of time it becomes a burden to close the gap? Because today, now, every time you order something, you get an email when it's ordered, you get an email when it's a label is created, you get an email when it's shipped, you get an email when it's on the way. What's the balance? And maybe if you can think of other examples of closing this uncertainty gap, because I think it's a very interesting point.
Yeah, that's a really, really perceptive question. I really probably should do a research project on just this exact idea of when is it too much? Like, on one hand, I believe, and I've got evidence of this from other case studies, that customers rarely say, please stop informing me so well, right? Because it is a net benefit. But if every business starts to do this, does it then feel burdensome to get all of these notifications, et cetera? So, for example, the Domino's Pizza Tracker, which when you order a Domino's pizza from any of the Domino's Pizza locations, of which there are thousands, they now will send you push notifications to close the uncertainty gap around your pizza being made. And it's a little much, right? Because, like, they're putting mushrooms on your pizza, they're putting cheese on your pizza, the pizza's in the box is in the car's around the corner. I'm like, dude, like, I believe you're gonna make the pizza. I trust you. You're a $40 billion pizza company. Like, I'm pretty sure you're gonna do it. It's too much, right? But then the other day, I bought some leather sneakers online. I made a mistake because I was drinking tequila and shopping online, which I don't recommend.
I'm sure it never happened to you before.
Yeah, it happens to me quite a bit, but it's for work. And so I bought these sneakers, and then I get the confirmation email, and it says, we're going to start making your sneakers and expect to receive them in 8 weeks. And I was like, wait, what? I totally missed the part. Completely missed the part where they're making these from scratch. I assumed, like, they're already have them. I'll get them in 2 days. So that was a bit of a discovery. And I thought about canceling the order, but I'm like, nah, I really like them. Let's just play this out. But it was an amazing example of just the right amount of uncertainty gap, because here's what they did. Every Wednesday, I got an email from my account manager who would say, Jay, we're working on your sneakers. And this week, we are going to put them on the last. And here's how we do that. And here's a little video of Manuel in Argentina, who's the guy who makes the last. And then the next week, it's like, we're tanning the leather. And here's, Julia, who does literally like a documentary film of step by step how these sneakers were made. And it was like amazingly educational, informative. It was entertaining. I kind of looked forward to getting the email every Wednesday. So I don't think there's one answer to your question. I think it's not all notifications are created equal. Every notification is an ability to use content marketing to tell your story and reinforce your brand attributes. Number one, it doesn't just have to be, it's shipped, right? You can do better marketing than that. And then number two, I think your willingness to get that many notifications is somewhat tied to the value of what it is that you've purchased and how often you're likely to purchase it again. So I'm only going to buy these sneakers once, right? So I was like, yeah, give me all this stuff. But if I'm going to get a pizza once a week, it's like, yeah, I don't need all that. So I think that's the answer, but I really like that we're having this conversation because it really makes me want to do a study on it.
Yeah, we can talk about that. We can also talk about the generational effect you mentioned before. We actually, we've been doing it now. We automate calls for almost 5 years now. And every time we talk with a customer, they tell us something like our demographics are different. We don't mention the customer. They tell, no, but this is restaurants. People who answer the phone on restaurants, it's people that maybe are immigrants, 10 years in school, depends on the cuisine. And Chinese restaurants always going to be somebody from a Chinese descent. They're going to be different. They may not like automation. We work with a company called Because Market. They exclusively serve older people, or transit authorities that serve people with disabilities, truck drivers with loves travel. Every time we hear my audience is different, I'm not going to deal with automation. And we discovered, and I think it's actually supports your time conclusion, that it doesn't matter. It's actually really interesting anecdote. We talked with Loves Travel. It's a trucking company, and they told us our truck drivers are bored. They are in the cabin. They are on their way. They need to decide where to stop and get gas and maybe shower and change. And they love to speak with our customer service representative. because they're bored.
It's like a
So
companion.
they may not like it. And reality was, no, they probably prefer to listen to music. Even though they're not going anywhere, they're in the cabin of a truck, they still adopted it greatly because of that. I think because speed, because there's always a better alternative than calling customer service. And the same happened was because market. They told us this is all the people that are retired, they sit at home. Talking with the agent might be the only human interaction they have a day. And we are all like teary eyes thinking about the elderly, that we are preventing them from this human connection. And they also adopted automation in spades, because even if you're retired, there's better thing you can do with your time. Go outside, and definitely you don't want to talk about adult diapers, which is one of the products they sell was a customer service agent. So I think speed actually crossed generations in an interesting way. And I wonder if you have any research about that.
Yeah, actually I do. It was one of the most interesting findings in the research. And by the way, you can get the research at thetimetowin.com, thetimetowin.com. And it doesn't cost you anything. I don't even ask for your email address. Just download it. You'll love it. One of the things that totally blew me away is the most patient generation, okay? The group that's willing to give businesses a little extra time to respond or resolve, Gen Z, the youngest consumers. And that surprised me, because I have 2 Gen Zs in my family, and patient is not usually the adjective that I use to describe them, because of course they grew up with technology, they grew up with smartphones, etc. But I think that the answer here is that cohort, which is 25 to 13 years old presently, something like that, they, in most cases, don't have as many time commitments in their life, right? So they're not as quote unquote busy. And so if they've got to spend an extra 2, 5, 10, 15 minutes, it doesn't cut into something else that they got to do. Conversely, the least patient generation, right? To your point about adult diapers, baby boomers, the least patient. And that surprised me, because I've worked with a lot of brands in my career that do serve primarily an older customer demographic. And I have heard this phrase or this statement in a lot of conference rooms and Zoom calls, and you probably have too. Well, our customers are primarily older, so we don't have to get back to them as quickly because they're probably retired. They don't have anything else to do. Turns out, if you're retired, the one thing you do want to focus on is how come it's taken them so long to respond to my email, right? It's like you're obsessing on that. It's like your thing of the day. And it actually really surprised me, at least, that the young people are more patient and the older people are less patient. And that's certainly different than what my assumptions were going into the research.
I'm not surprised, because we've seen it pretty consistently. And I also love your Gen Z example. I remember reading, I think it was a New York Times article where a reporter just hang out with a bunch of teenagers for a long time. And she said their time was fluid. So we are very scheduled. And when you're younger, your time is more fluid. You may be as busy, but your time is more fluid. You don't make as strong commitments. You may meet your friends, hang out until it's not fun anymore, do something else. So when time is more fluid, you may be more patient, but your time is scheduled. This is us, we're working, we have meetings. I cannot even imagine, where do I find the day, the time to call customer service, where it might take me half an hour to get somebody on the phone, or an hour and a half. There's no way of telling. So which time of the day I can do it, where I have this elastic time, not to mention that they will, for an hour and a half, keep playing their marketing messages in my ears. I can't even concentrate on anything else.
Yeah, but at least now, in many cases, they tell you 2 things that are important, right? So when you call, you hear calls will be answered in the order in which they were received. And every time I hear that from a brand, I laugh out loud, because I always have the same thought. What was the second idea? Okay, if we're not going to answer them in the order they're received, how are we going to answer these calls? By height? What was the backup idea, right? I mean, it's just hilarious that they have to say that. And then the second thing, of course, now is that in almost every case, they're like, okay, it's going to be 11 minutes. So they give you some sort of number to shoot at, which is really, really important psychologically, because again, it kind of closes that uncertainty gap we were talking about earlier. It wasn't that long ago that if you called and you were on hold, they didn't have that technology, right? This as well as anybody. It didn't exist. So you were on hold for an unknowable amount of time. And that I remember very clearly. That really sucked
That's
because
stressful.
you're like,
Yeah.
am I going to make it to my kid's ball game or not? I have no idea. Should I hang up?
Yeah.
You
Do
know,
I give
like,
up? Yeah.
yeah, what am I in? What am I going to be in on this for? Like,
Yeah.
so now at least in most cases, you got something to shoot at, which changes psychology a little bit.
So let's talk about AI, because if you think of AI, it's actually talking about this idea of calls are answered in the order they're received. Calls are answered right away. There's actually no order to it. It's
Yeah,
like
right. Exactly.
1,000 people are called at the same time. We can just answer 1,000 calls. It's
Hmm.
actually happens to us when a customer may have an outage of some sort, and all of a sudden the call spike will 10x, and we're just going to answer all the calls all at once because it doesn't really matter to automation. And even talking to an agent now became not first in, first out, because, for example, I'll just stick with this AAA example. If we identify a safety issue, we'll pass you to an agent and have you pass the queue.
Yeah.
So you're not going to wait for anyone. If you say my dog is locked in a vehicle, you're speaking with an agent in 10 seconds. We don't
Yeah.
want to deal with that. We want somebody trained, somebody who's been there for several years and know how to deal with emergency, handle that. So with this perspective, is AI and automation the most important tool and tool set of businesses when they want to be speedy? If time is so important, here you go. You have a winning card. Automate your calls and your chats, and no one ever have to wait.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, yes, I think that's absolutely the case. Although one of the things that I caution people about, especially right now, is you can't just say, give me some of that AI, right? You got to be a little more thoughtful about it strategically as a business and say, all right, what are we trying to solve for, and how can AI help us do that? And then to your point about, okay, if a dog's locked in the car, then jump the queue, etc. You've got to figure that out, right? So you have to actually have some sense of the customer journey and potential customer needs, as well as aligned data. And to me, the biggest problem right now with most businesses is that they desperately want AI because they're trying to save time, they're trying to save money, they're trying to boost profits, all that, but they don't actually have the data to do it. Right? They're actually putting the cart before the horse. Right? In many cases, they don't have the right data, they don't have their aligned data. They can't build AI models that actually do what they want it to do unless they work with somebody like you. And Replicant can obviously help them get there. But that's the miss that I'm seeing right now, is that people see, oh, AI can make this work, but then they don't have the raw materials to execute on it yet.
Yeah, and I think everybody's in a different place in the journey, and you're right. The data is something. If you don't know how to start and you don't know what you want to solve, it's gonna be a hard journey for you, because you're gonna end up. I call it a speed bump. You say, oh, let me put some AI here at the beginning, and all of a sudden you just create a speed bump to your customers. So it's actually goes against speed. Imagine you call, you still hear this old IVR, then you speak with this AI, and this AI doesn't really solve your issue,
Yeah,
and then you
that's
transfer
right.
to an agent, and wait time are not shorter because most customers' issues are not solved by AI. You just added another speed bump in the
That's
process,
it.
and we so many of them. You get angry customers, you pay more, and you actually decrease the speed instead of increasing the speed.
There was such a rush to implement chatbots when that technology was first coming out, and I totally understand why. But a lot of it was not super well executed, and I think we've all probably experienced, or most of us have experienced personally, and certainly anecdotally, the scenario where you're like, okay, this is supposed to be faster, but this is totally not faster. It's both slower and more aggravating, and that's the challenge. And so one of the things that I think is really important when we think about AI and customer service is we have to come at it from a bias of how can we make the customer's experience better, and then if we do that, we will make money at this. Like, it will be more efficient, we will yield positive business outcomes. But unfortunately, what I typically see is the initial question is, how can we make and save more money using technology? And then, well, let's hope that customers like it too. And I think if we just flip the script on those two questions and say, how do we make it a better experience, knowing that if we do that, it'll pay off, as opposed to let's talk about money first and then try and shoehorn the experience into it, I think we end up with better outcomes.
All right. Speaking of speed, we have to wrap it up, and we have a very quick segment towards the end that we call a speed dial, in which you have to answer every one of the questions in one breath of air or one
All
quick
right,
sentence.
I'm working on it.
Let's speed dial. I first want to ask you, what's some of your favorite tequilas? It was not planned, but I have to ask.
That's like which of my favorite children. That's a very difficult question. But some of my favorite brands, G4 is a great brand. El Tesoro is a great brand. Tequila Ocho. Probably my favorite one across the board is called Wild Common, owned by a National Geographic photographer. It's a really great brand.
Everybody's taking notes right now. Do you have any recent example of exceptional customer service?
Well, I love your example from away, and I've had something happen similar to me as well. But I think the best example is I got my house painted not long ago. And so I called three painters, as you do. And the first painter got back to me in 2 hours, 2 hours, and said, well, I can't paint the house today, obviously. I can't even give you a quote, but based on what you told me on your voicemail, here's sort of what I think it's going to cost. And here's when I can come out and give you an estimate. And then here's when I can come out and do the job. And then the second painter called me back in like 2 days. Third painter called me in 11 days, at which point I'd already hired the first guy and had the house painted, right? So I don't know that it's like a magnificent example of customer service, but I think it's super relevant because it was quick to respond, it was quick to resolve, and it took away uncertainty instantly. And that's what you should be doing.
Yeah. So what do you think when you think of automation and think 5 years out, what percentage of customer service could be completely automated in your opinion?
90.
Yeah. And in this world, what traits do the new customer service agent need to have? What's the one or two traits that will make them successful in a world where most of it is automated?
Well, I think you're going to have to be better at math, right? Because so much of it is going to be based on textual analysis, vocal pattern analysis. So you tend to think of a great customer service agent today as somebody with a lot of natural empathy and soft skills and just that people person, if you will. And I think the great customer service agents, who will primarily be managers of technology in the future, are going to have a lot more analytical skills and frankly math skills than they probably do today, because a lot of the empathy part is going to be handled by AI.
What excites you most about AI?
I believe that AI has the potential to eliminate almost all customer dissatisfaction.
Wow, that's a strong statement. So lastly, on the spectrum, AI will destroy the world, or AI is going to do amazing things to the world? Where are you on the spectrum?
Amazing things for the world, but not without some significant growing pains and adjustment. I mean, the job loss is unavoidable, or at least the need to retrain and reskill people. There's just no way around it. And I don't think anybody is really prepared for that or has an answer for what that's going to mean or how that's going to affect everybody's lives globally. It's going to be a wild ride. It's not going to be an easy ride, frankly. But I think the other end of it is going to be like a magic trick.
Yeah. Jay, that was an amazing conversation. I could have continued for hours, but we ran out of time. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for our listeners for dialing in, and goodbye until next time. Thank
Thanks.
you, Jay.
You bet.